It's Tromonte and friends. Let's have a conversation.
So this is Tremonte and friends. I have a very special episode for y'all today. I have a very special guest as well. I have my good brother here, Léonard Cavé. We've been friends for a very long time. Currently, he's attending Georgia State University College of Business, the J.Mack Robinson College of Business, pursuing his Executive MBA, which is way more than what I'm doing. Uh, Located in
Don't
Atlanta,
say
Georgia, and tell the people a little bit about yourself.
that. Well, thank you very much for the intro, and don't say that. Don't say that. But yeah, so Leonard Cavé, born and raised in New York, and then transitioned down to Florida. Got my bachelor degree at the wonderful, great Daytona State College. Originally went to Bethune-Cookman College, and then it transitioned over to university. And from that point forward, went through some wonderful life and interesting experiences. Transitioned over to Atlanta, where now I've actually I'm currently taking on this strategic project management role for Mercedes-Benz. Mercedes-Benz USA, located in Sandy Springs, Georgia, at this present moment in my life. And now I'm currently, as he mentioned, enrolled at the Executive MBA program at the wonderful J.Mack Robinson College of Business. And
That's right.
just trying to set the example, pave the way, and create a landscape for many others to follow and be um, aware of, and enjoying the beautiful flowers that we're going to groom.
That's great stuff. That's great stuff. So today our conversation is going to be centered around organizational behavior. Uh, Let the people know what exactly that entails before we get into kind of the nitty gritty of it.
Absolutely. So, what do you think when you think of organizational behavior? You think of what are the habits, what are the lifestyles, what is the cultural expectations, or just the cultural environment of any organization. A lot of people really don't pay much attention to that concept, let alone that type of impact in
Mhm.
their current role.
Right.
So organizational behavior really centers itself around the psychology and just the way that people act, premeditated and even post meditated, just their behaviors and how it impacts and affects not just one person, but your team, other teams, just the overall organization. So
Mhm.
just think about it from the standpoint of, you have a code, you have a head code. Your body is an overall big organism.
Mhm.
Your head code impacts the remaining activity of your body, from your fingertips and all of those things. So you can get sick, but it has a impact on the overall organism. So it's how to really recognize the behavior of the overall organism, so that not only can you nip the cold in the bud, but you're able to regain back the energy and the momentum of your normal behavior. And you just translate that into your current workplace. What are the things that psychologically move your organization in the decisions that they make, whether it's personnel or whether it's performance,
Mhm.
and just overall structure of things? So that's really what organizational behavior really entails.
So this essentially affects not only the organization as a whole, but certain groups within the organization and individuals as well. So,
Absolutely. Absolutely on that topic. I mean, from leadership, I mean, you could even look at it from your leadership structure. Who are your leaders? Who are the managers? Who are the supervisors? Who are the employees on the ground floor? Their amount of work by which they put in, or the amount of effort or the lack thereof, can be a testament to the leadership and management styles of the organization. So it's very multifaceted.
okay, okay. So what are some general issues you think that a company would encounter from a behavioral organizational standpoint when designing a company or from its inception or from the onset?
So think about it from the standpoint of, and we're going to use a lot of real life examples. I think a lot of people can really relate to something that they could apply to their own life. So let's say you're aligned to an organization like myself, Mercedes-Benz. This is a company, a corporation that has been in the automotive industry for generations. I mean, you're talking about a longevity history of being one of the first to create the vehicle, the official car, and progressing it through. Their organizational structure is something of a dynamic by which they follow their own mantra of way of thinking. So if they're all about performance, that's why their branding is the best or nothing. Why is it the best or nothing? Not only is it that they're looking for the best product to provide to the consumer, but they're also bringing in representatives, people that represent the brand holistically for great quality, where whatever they touch and however they implement and execute and plan, it's the best or nothing at all. And they take that with great pride by issuing the proper training and the proper selection of leadership by which they want to select those. So if you go into your organization and you ask yourself, okay, what is our brand? What is our company brand? The company brand plays a major role in these kind of legacied organizations. They've been here for years. They have their key niche by which they focus on, and they want to, really build a roster of key assets, human assets, by which they not only lead their organization through the success that they're looking for, but they're able to promote that and motivate that and strategically influence that into the contributors of these organizations. So it's a trickling down effect. And one of the key issues that is often a question that rises is, are they selecting the right talent? Are they selecting the right talent? What is their criteria by which they select their talent, their talent pool, even at that? We look at this entire transition where the world is going more computerized and technologically, influenced, where once upon a time ago, it would be the human individual coming in with the resume, et cetera, doing that. Now it's all internet. So now how do you filter that to select the right candidates with the right criteria? And this is a cultural change, which requires technology and also the human eye of knowing what they see in front of them. Is it going to meet what they need in that organization and what they're trying to strive for? So it can be very complex, but the main point is, how do you merge the technological with the intellectual? And that's when you really start to see certain choices and decisions and directions in selecting roster, selecting individuals, selecting new employees, new hire-ons, to see if it blends in with the chemistry of the organization and the brand.
Okay. So from a hierarchical standpoint, because you kept mentioning leadership, which is important. Within an organization, what happens when leadership doesn't necessarily know how to lead the proper way? And what I mean by that is, when you select certain talent, we all come from different backgrounds, we all have different cultures. And every person in management, the supervisor, sometimes they're not the best leaders. Right. And some people who are working under them, some people they don't like authority. They don't like being micromanaged or anything like that. So how do you resolve that issue, or how do you kind of mesh those worlds together to where each side is somewhat happy while we're working towards a common goal?
So there's a three-part dynamic that comes to it. The three dynamic piece is the contributing problem. What is the problem what is the contributions that's kind of the causation of the problem? Not necessarily the source, but the participants of it. Is it one participant? Is it a multiple participants? As you mentioned, leadership does play a major role. And if a leader is not aware of the contributors and how they contribute, even that is a problem that impacts the other segment, which is sourcing the problem. Understanding what is the key background, what is the key foundational root cause of that problem. Is it that that leader is not competent to managing individuals, or are they not competent in translating the information to delegate the tasks to the appropriate participant or contributor? And then at the same exact time, you look at it from how it impacts the business, and is it going to become a bigger business problem? So understanding the contribution of the problem, the source of the problem, and acknowledging its impact on the business are three key factors that leaders need to take a very stringent look at. They need to take the time out to really step back and really view what's really going on. They need to have like that quarterback view. Even though they are playing the coach, by which they are the ones that are delegating the plays and having the players, execute those plays, a coach still needs to have the ability to view each and every aspect of who is contributing. I take the example from football. If you're going to have, your quarterback, which would be, let's say, your leader, and you have your offensive lineman, they're doing the blocking, but your receivers are not following the routes, and they're constantly, breaking the routes, breaking the plays. As a coach, you have to inquire, what is the causation? And communication is often one of the key things that's missing in the realm of leadership that a person can possibly overlook, or they do overlook. They automatically make the assumption that this person is disruptive, or this person is difficult, and by those strong immediate assumptions, they're not looking at it from the sense of what is the, and those are the things that they need to be very mindful of. So I address it as, addressing the contributing source of the problem, the direct source, the mineralization of the source, and then how it impacts the business if it continues. When that leader has the ability to analyze that gap, which is primarily the source of the issue, and it may involve them taking a humble look at themselves and saying, okay, I'm not grasping the information, then they have to have that open dialogue and that open communication with the participant to really be able to galvanize the best part of that ability to transition that quote unquote difficult or disruptive person into a phenomenally contributor or excellent participant of the role at hand or the job at hand.
So you mentioned legacy companies when we were initially starting the meeting here. And as companies that have longevity, that have been around for a long time, are there any preventative measures that can be taken to ensure that a company doesn't have to rebuild their reputation because of a certain mistake they made on like a public relations standpoint, something that becomes public knowledge to the masses?
That's very interesting you say that, because that actually circles around one of our major case studies right now with the Boeing situation with 757 or 737 MAX plane, because they've to give clarity to that, this particular plane was a successor back in the late 70s, early 80s. And it actually had a lot of great value, a lot of massive success with the public and a lot of the different companies and corporations that were investing into it. So when they brought it back live, they had those unfortunate events that did occur. They had a crash that happened with an organization or a company called Lion Air. And then roughly 3 or 5 days later, as news reported, they had another crash. And it was very consistent. It was very consistent. And in that particular case study, that case study alongside a lot of news articles that were published from the New York Times, the Guardian, Wall Street Journal. A lot of them were providing different aspects of information saying it was potentially technological, or it was negligence in taking safety precautions.
Mm-hmm.
It was, poor management. There was firing of certain, individuals that were leaders or managers of certain sectors of risk management. So you could just tell that it would become a debacle for the public eyes to see, no
Mm-hmm.
matter what, news communication you utilize. So, and as a result, they actually went through 2 to 3 different CEOs. So even that turnover rate from an executive level.
That's the leadership
occurred.
you're talking about. Yeah.
Exactly. So the question is, who's to blame? And it's a much more vast and much more bigger concept than that. But I think we could always direct our attention as to who to blame, right? Who broke the vase? Mom, dad, brother, sister, the dog that ran across. Or mom should have never put it there. Dad should have never bought it. Sister should have never, ran across, and son probably should have never played basketball in the home.
Mm-hmm.
Whatever dynamic we choose, that's our personal perspective. However, we have to look at it from a grander scale by which we need to ask ourselves, okay, the damage was done and it's tragic and it's truly unfortunate. Now, if you get taken on board, how do you fix that?
Mm-hmm.
How do you change the dynamic and the branding of that organization? And it involves a multifaceted aspect. One of the things that I've learned is that it takes the key things of ability, integrity, and benevolence. Like you have to have all of that, all of these key major factors where it involves being a star player, because you're going to have to be the face of the organization. At the same exact time, you need cheerleaders to be able to, or the concept of cheerleaders to help encourage and support and provide, leverage, some form of leverage to encourage the public. Like, okay, we've done the due diligence, we've done our responsibilities, we've done the risk management, risk assessment, everything. Quality control is good. I mean, today is November 24th, 2020, and they already have the FAA already say, okay, these planes are good to go and they're safe to fly.
Mm-hmm.
But that doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to book a flight next week and say, yeah,
That's
I
right.
want to be on that 737. Right. So it causes more interest and focus to dive in. Then you have to look at the moral compass. How is the organization really taking the massive amount of deaths of those that were lost?
Mm-hmm.
We understand that you do have stakeholders and shareholders that you have to address, but what is your moral compass? What was your thoughts? What is your ideas? What is your moral hazard level?
Mm-hmm.
Right? Moral hazard. It's the ability of understanding that you can profit off of someone that know's loss because you know the information and you choose not to, inform them, or your level of risk is determined by whether you choose to inform them or not. And that's very key when you're an executive of an organization. So understanding these key facets has to be the main vehicle in driving the communication with the public and trying to do reassurance. It's a challenging thing, but it deals with a lot of partnering with different aspects and different matrices of your organization to communicate that message. I mean, you're in the master's program as well. And, correct me if I'm wrong, communication is one of the key focuses that is important. So if the communication aspect is there, what would be most important to you if you're getting the directive of, okay, we need to change the mold, change the branding, and encourage the organization? Like if I'm the executive and I'm saying this to you, you're my, CMO, Chief Marketing Officer, I would have to delegate this responsibility to you. So just for, real play, not role play, but real play, if I laid that into your hands, having the knowledge of knowing that I need to be the star player, I'm gonna be the face of it, but I'm trusting in you with integrity, with the moral compass of being the force, the vocal force to galvanize our cheerleaders, our old clientele, and potentially new. how would I be able to influence you and help and partner with you, most importantly, to get the message?
So that's a great question. Well, the first thing that I would do is I would hold our organization accountable for what happened, because it did happen on our watch. So I think accountability is big when you're addressing the public uh, with any traumatic event that has occurred. Now, it may not necessarily be your fault, but your company's brand is on that accident, on that unfortunate incident, and you have to address it from that standpoint. Pointing fingers and blaming things never looks good in the public eye. It never looks good in the
Agreed.
public eye. And now we have, and then it's pretty much a digital world now, I would say. I
Yeah,
wanted to say like we're getting there, but we're pretty much there. We're in
absolutely.
a digitized society that will only become more so as we evolve down the line. Everybody has access to everything.
Correct.
So, and it's easy for an organization today, it's easy for their reputation to be slandered. And it's easy to push people away from trusting the organization. We see it with organizations like Starbucks. We see it with
Right.
legacy companies all the time, where they make a mistake and they don't own up to the mistake fully.
Correct.
And the
Correct.
consumers and the casual people, the American citizens or people internationally, I'm just speaking for me because we're here in America. We don't
Right.
we don't we don't take to that very well when you don't own up to what you've done. And then the second thing I would do is be as transparent as possible. So all the details that we have, like you mentioned, Boeing, whatever details that we have from an investigation that was started or anything, we should share that with the public as much as we can without allowing any private information out there that isn't necessary when you're explaining things. So hold ourselves accountable and to be as transparent as possible with the people. And that plays into that benevolent factor. So we're showing people our moral compass that we do care. We do care about the lives that lost and the interconnected lives that are affected. So someone has a sister or a brother or whomever, a spouse, they're affected as well. And then we have to ensure the safety of people who do intend to fly in the future. And that's hard to do. And that takes a lot of time. It takes a lot of time. That takes reassessing your whole company. That takes, unfortunately, making some changes within a company. As you said, with the 3 different CEOs, sometimes people have to step down. Sometimes people are let go because of
Right.
situations like that. Um, and it's funny you say legacy companies because I always think of the federal government, which is a legacy, which is
Right.
kind of a company, but they essentially are the decision makers for our country.
Correct.
And we if they don't perform well, or as you mentioned, things have happened on our watch these past few
Right.
years, uh, some people have to be uh, dismissed, so if you will.
No,
No,
you're,
simply
you're correct.
because things aren't running in a diplomatic format how they're supposed to be. So
Right.
that happens in that within that organization when the behavior isn't aligned with our values, things have to change, and that's one of the realities that we have to face when we're talking about behavioral organization. Do you think that uh, it's necessary to, I'm not sure how many companies do this. I know they do this from like a financial standpoint at the end of the
Mhm.
year, but do you think it's necessary that companies and leaders in the company assess the company as a whole as often as possible to kind of get a good pulse of the culture and what's going on? Because I find, just to be transparent with you here, I find that a lot of uh, people who are in high places in companies, they're out of touch with what's really going on within the company.
So that's a very good question, and I say that's a very good question because it kind of coincides with slightly the topic of discussion that we just mentioned. But I do feel that there's a strong correlation between the two because another organization I was going to mention because I once upon a time worked for them was Wells Fargo, and I shoot no shots, I just state facts, and that's just my philosophy. Um, Wells Fargo underwent some trials and tribulations, and it was self-inflicted because of greed, and that was something that was behavioral. And when you talk about not having their finger on the pulse and not being really relational, intentionally relational with the culture. The situation that transpired with Wells Fargo in the past shows you how they chose to profiteer off of the lack of their pulse or the masking of caring for those in that culture that were not really of the high level of finance, because there was a separate aspect of classism that was displayed where capitalism, their greed in capitalism allowed them to leverage their greed on the lower class rather than the upper class. With the whole account situation of falsification of accounts, creating more accounts in a variety of different ways, whether it be personal loans, checking accounts, savings accounts, etc. And it was really unfortunate because, you know, when you have such a strong distance from the very people that help fund and establish brand loyalty and speak highly of you, when you disconnect yourself from such, you really create an earthquake, a crater, in my opinion, a meteorite distance in a relationship that's very hard to bring back, especially when there's other competitors that they can select from. So I think that stems from organizational leadership and how they interpret relationships with their clients or their customers in the service and the products that they provide. You know, you look at WeWork. WeWork was another example where the CEO or the founder, Adam Newman, was literally capitalizing on just collecting revenue and wasn't paying individuals and wasn't doing his due diligence and just didn't care, just simply had outright no care. Same thing when you look at the initial introduction of Uber. I mean, you know, the way that that individual had treated the women in the organizations, it's just a colossal of different aspects of poor leadership and poor representation of what a brand, what a company should start off, either continue or even extend itself when you look at legacy. So organizations need to really revisit relationship bonding with not those that can easily fund their, business, but I think those that really need it so they can build brand loyalty and extend I don't want to say extend the olive branch per se, but just extend the opportunities, because there's just groups of people that just don't have it.
No, you're right, and it's funny you mentioned Wells Fargo. I think within the past couple of months, I did read an article about where the CEO, he made a statement that he wanted to kind of promote minorities, and his statement was there isn't a lot of talent to choose from. And
Right.
my first inclination was, have you really looked for the talent though? And
Right.
he eventually recanted his statement. As this is what I mentioned about the accountability piece. When you make those type of statements in the public, what are some challenges that you see that you would face as a business owner or CEO when you're structuring your own company from everything that you've learned?
Well, for sure, one of the key things that I would need is one of the key foundation would be chemistry. I think chemistry is very, very key. I know it sounds very cliche, but the chemistry of your leadership and your chemistry with the team by which you select your individuals is very, very key. I'm a strong believer that I don't want you to control my mood, and I don't want you to control my motive, but I can feel your energy. I can feel your energy. If I feel a positivity, an exuberant energy, I'm going to want to potentially, grab a hold of it. If I sense negativity, I may be the individual that may want to stray away or not. And that's very key when it comes down to being a leader, being a supervisor, being a manager, especially being in an executive realm, because you have to show a very diverse aspect of yourself. I think one of the greatest quotes I've ever heard, and there's a plethora of quotes that we've shared, but I think there's one quote that I actually, fell in love with when I first heard it. And it was, when it comes down to leadership, when it comes down to being an executive, you have to know how to dance on the dance floor, but also go up on the balcony and watch the dance floor. That was probably the most prophetic quote I ever heard, because it gives me the clear conciseness of being able to understand the ground roots, understand the pulse of the culture from an internal and external of an organization, but at the same exact time, look at it from a large POV by which you're looking to secure, ensure, and levitate and elevate your overall experience, your overall organization. Once upon a time, I used to DJ. And when you're a DJ, you are technically controlling the whole mood and energy of the whole entire event, the whole party. And sometimes there are DJs that will just literally focus on whatever their list of music is. And then there's going to be those DJs that only take, requests. Like, yeah, I want to take those requests. What's your request? Yeah, I want to. And at some point, you'll realize that there's just certain DJs that say, no, you can take your requests outside. I'm good. But what's most important and what's very valuable about that is that DJ is the orchestra. He's the I forgot what they call it. He's the individual who oversees the orchestra, but the conductor. And as an executive, you are pretty much the conductor, where you want everything to flow appropriately. So when you have your own business, when you have your own organization, you have to make sure that you have the chemistry aligned with the individuals that you bring on board. It's not just, I'm bringing my best friend. I'm not bringing, my cousins, sisters, nephews, whatever. It's more of, are you able to perform the task at a high level? But at the same exact time, can you motivate in a positive notation? One of my favorite shows is actually Billions. And I think something that individuals should take under great consideration when they own their own business is to look into a performance coach. I think a performance coach in your organization is very, very, very valuable when it comes down to the behavior of your team, especially the behaviors of if they're having a good day, if they're having a bad day, if they're having a slump in sales, let's say retail, or they're increasing in their sales, but they feel not quite satisfied with what they're doing. I believe that a performance coach, just like in the show, Wendy Rhodes, played by Maggie, I forgot her name, but she's a phenomenal actress. And her responsibility is to really dissect the causation, the source, as I mentioned before, the source of the problem that's kind of containing each and every participant in performing. And it's not to say that this individual takes the place of the responsibilities of the CEO, but this is a person that the CEO uses as an aid, as a support, like a teacher's aid or an assistant vice in that sense, to help galvanize the mood and the emotions of these individuals. So it's really understanding the chemistry of your team, understanding that they can perform at a high level, regardless of color, creed, religious beliefs, etc. Because it shouldn't just focus on these individuals here or these individuals there. It should be an encompassing of, are you the best for this, but can you also potentially relate? And I know for some new organizations or modern organizations, that's very complex.
It is very complex. And what you're essentially touching on is being empathetic towards those who are not like you or who may work in different positions as you.
Right.
How do you become empathetic as a leader when you're not in the field every day? When I mean in the field is you may not be at this particular brick and mortar company. You may be at a meeting somewhere overseas. But how do you stay in touch? You do have to hire the right people that report back to you accurately. But from your standpoint, what is the best way, especially in a time like this? So you take time with COVID, where a lot of people are working remotely, and you don't really get to see people face to face. We don't get to have the in-person meetings that we normally would, where you can kind of see people's, facial reactions and their body language. You can kind of read the room a little better. How do we do that now and going forward? Because it looks like, just from a realistic standpoint, that COVID isn't letting up anytime soon. Actually, as we speak, it's getting a little worse.
Right.
But
Right.
how do we do that? How do we become empathetic through mediums like Zoom or other ways which we have to communicate now? We're kind of forced to communicate.
Right. So one thing is this, I noticed that, within your organization, if you're part of a legacy organization, one of the key things is to identify what is the main source or what are the resource tools by which you communicate with your team and your colleagues in different locations.
Mm-hmm.
For example, I know that I had a review for a compliance review by which I kind of led just to give clarification around the processes. And they didn't use Skype. They were actually utilizing Cisco. So different, and yet they're still aligned with the organization. So identifying the tools and the resources by which you can communicate is first most. Secondly is, to me, it could start off as a basic as just reaching out. Hello, just want to make sure everyone is safe during these times. And, making sure that if there's anything that we can do or that I can do, please feel free to reach out. I personally believe there is zero excuse to not communicate with your team and your colleagues and individuals that you do business with. Zero. Because this is the most vulnerable humankind has ever been. Since I could think of the Great Depression, you could think of the 1987 Black Friday or Black Monday, where the stock market plummeted. 9/11 was another one. And yet, when you really think about it, those were not even to discredit those events, but those were, I don't want to say isolative, but they were region oriented. Mm-hmm. For example, individuals that were in California, it only emotionally they were attached to it if they had family or individuals that were in those buildings or in that location of New York.
Yeah.
Same thing with, let's say, the Great Depression. Those that were greatly impacted were a part of a group of individuals that didn't have the security or the financial power or capability at that time as they named them throughout history, robber barons.
Mm-hmm.
Now we're looking at a pandemic that has impacted the globe.
Yeah.
Impacted the globe. I mean, businesses have shut down, from small businesses to even big businesses. Yeah. Individuals are passing away, unfortunately, by it. I mean, we've hit the millions, and not even just from a US standpoint, but from millions. So as an organization, as a company, as a corporation, the leader, who is a star player, who is the face of the organization, needs to make it a point and needs to make it a necessity to really keep the communication lines open to communicate with their team members and their organization to show that they actually care. Mm-hmm. I mean, it's very, very important to do that. And, some of these vehicles or instruments, like I said, the Zooms, the Skypes, having the cameras on, that's another thing too. Especially when you have some of these meetings and these town hall meetings and things of that nature. And if you have a more direct relationship or more direct communication with a manager or colleague, send them a text message, send them a call. Hey, just want to make sure you're okay, you're all right. The little gestures compounded over time have a greater impact.
So in closing, first I want to say thank you for coming on and taking the time out your day, getting your executive MBA. I appreciate that. I know how hard you work, and I know what it takes to be in a position like this, knowing where both of us come from. So organizational behavior is very important, especially just from a personal standpoint. A lot of working class people feel powerless within the organizations that they work for. There are less unions like there were, probably 40, 50 years ago. So we just feel like we don't have the resources at our disposal to kind of voice how we feel, changes that we're going through. I know the company that I work for, they try to do their best to make sure that, we're okay. And it's just because sometimes we don't have the status that other people have. We don't have the funds that you mentioned to lean back on, as people are unemployed right now. And it's hard to come to work with a positive attitude when you have family that's been infected with COVID, or you're going through just the emotional toil of a year unlike any other. So it is difficult to manage every day. In closing, do you have anything else you want to share about organizational behavior, about the future of your endeavors, everything that you're involved in, which is
Well,
a lot,
appreciate
which is a lot.
that. It sure is. It sure is, man. Well, for starters, it's an honor, privilege, and a pleasure to have this time with you to, speak about this, because I know this is a topic that's foreign for our culture, very foreign to our culture, and it shouldn't be like that. It shouldn't be foreign to our culture as Black people, both for Black men, Black women, because this information is very valuable for us to know, especially if we're trying to level up and increase our values in the marketplace. And it's not just segregated for just Blacks or Browns. It's for all of us. And, this information is very valuable because what we're doing is a representation that, we as Black men, we are not the stereotypes by which we are looked at as threats. We are actually phenomenal investments if we take the time out to apply ourselves and do the research, do the knowledge, take the time out to take on that risk. And some of us are taking it by taking on these new legacied opportunities. Like, for example, there's a gentleman by the name of Chanel, who was the CEO he once upon a time was the CEO for American Express. I believe his tenure was from I want to say his tenure was from 1998 to maybe 2012 or something of that nature. And
So a little over a decade.
Yeah, a little over a decade. And he literally drastically changed the value and the culture, the organizational value and culture by how people interpret American Express. And he was a Black CEO. You even take that further where, you have other individuals as well that take on this opportunity, like the new dean that took over Wharton, University of Pennsylvania. She's the dean of Wharton. Who would have thought they would have selected her? And it's not to discredit her or to discount her, but when you look at the organizational history of this nation, of this country, from an institutional standpoint to even, company standpoint, you're now having these opportunities to see different cultures and different races take on executive roles and become extremely successful. I mean, same thing with the CEO of AMD, which is, I believe it's their American Microchip Devices. She has been taking the company phenomenal ventures. I mean, she has taken a company that once upon a time their stock was roughly $10, $12 a share. So now they're up $80 a share. And this has been within a 3 to 5 year range. So diversity works. If there's anybody that is unsure that their nationality or their, sexual orientation is challenging, they need to acknowledge that they do have a role and they do have an opportunity to change and revolutionize the corporate ladder and corporate the corporate stage, and revolutionize it for the good and for the better. It doesn't take away from the past and the history, but we should learn from the past so that we don't redo the same past. There's a old Bible statement that says, if you don't know your past, you're doomed to repeat it, because there's nothing new under the sun. So as long as we take a really structured and professional approach in dancing on the dance floor, but also walking upstairs on the balcony, whether it's creating your own company or being a part of a legacy company, you will be able to better gauge, better understand, and better leverage your skills to literally make sure everybody in your organization not only behaves, quote unquote, right? And I don't like the word behaves because it sounds, very dictatorship, but you're able to influence and motivate people internally to really leverage their best attributes of themselves, man. So
Well said, man. Well said. And once again, I hope you stay safe. I'll be seeing you soon. And thank you, everybody, for coming on and watching. Leo, once again, it's been an honor. Wish you well on your future endeavors. Hard work, man. A lot of hard work. And I will speak with you soon, man. Thank you again.
thank you very much. Pleasure and a privilege, man. See you soon, man.
Peace.
Take care.